Have you ever come home from a date, closed your front door, taken a deep breath and thought, what the hell just happened? I know I have. And sometimes the date even felt good. You're a little buzzed when you came back, a little excited, a little bit of the heart flutters, right? But underneath it, something just felt off, confusing, unsettling in a way you can't quite name. Your head is thinking, wow, that was an amazing date. But your body is quietly whispering to yourself, hang on a second, something doesn't add up here. If you watched my last video, we talked about the difference between thinking something is good and actually feeling that something is good, and how that gap often comes from your nervous system, not your logic. If you didn't watch that one, I've linked it below in the comments or the description, because this video lands very differently once you understand the difference between emotional safety and emotional intensity. And I know we've all had that second one, because I also know that you want to date a man who is serious about building a relationship with you without wasting months on men who aren't compatible, right? But here's where things get tricky. You meet someone you think you like, the date feels good, but the signals, well, they are mixed, right? And suddenly you're wondering, is this chemistry? Is this excitement? Or is something actually off? Or even worse, why do men who feel healthy also feel a little bit boring, right? So let's talk about that one. Because here's the part where most of us were never really taught, right? Healthy connection rarely creates confusion in the beginning. Confusion isn't depth, it's information, right? And when your nervous system is used to chaos or emotional roller coasters, healthy can just feel weirdly quiet at first, right? Vanilla, almost avoidant, almost like there's just no spark. But that quietness, that steadiness, it's often the exact thing your future relationship will be built on. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the early green flags so you can notice these within the first few dates, right? The ones that predict quietly long-term partnership. These aren't checklists at all. These are patterns you feel as much as you observe, right? So it's about your body and your mind. And by the way, queens, just because we're looking for something that isn't that heart palpitation, roller coaster, chase dynamic, that doesn't mean that the man you're going to end up with is actually boring. It's just sometimes it can feel like that in the beginning because you're so used to the chase dynamic, the mixed signals, the figuring it out, the having to talk to your friends, the looking up YouTube videos to decipher his signals, right? And so when you're not having to do any of that, you've actually got a lot of time on your hands. There's something that feels oddly weird about that, right? So let's get into the green flags. Green flag number one, he looks for reciprocity from you, right? He's not interested in a chase dynamic. There's so much content online saying you need a masculine energy man who pursues you, right? And yes, you want a man who initiates. But there is a huge difference between a man who pursues you and a man who chases, performs, or even worse, love bombs, right? When he's genuinely interested in you, he doesn't rush. He's not trying to fast track the relationship. It doesn't feel like Armageddon's about to happen and you've got to go on a number of dates in that week one, right? Or you're messaging every 30 seconds, or you're speaking on the phone every day, right? He's not trying to fast track closeness. He pays attention to your pace. And if you've been doing this work for a while, you already know that part of your challenge is slowing it down, right? He pays attention to reciprocity. What signals are you giving? What pace do you want to go out, right? He checks for emotional consent, right? So he's not invading your space and almost saying the words and giving you the feelings without you really even inviting that in. He's checking for your emotional consent. He's also checking for physical consent, and he is not pushing that, right? A healthy adjusted man does not push for physical intimacy, because he knows that if you're something special, that's going to make you run. So he's not going to do that. Healthy relationships are built on reciprocity, not one-sided effort, not chasing, and just not sort of like this old-fashioned concept that women actually can't have a say in the relationship, right? You can say it's going too fast. You can even say it's going too slow, but the point is it's an energetic exchange between two people, not just like a one-way energy thing. You're not Tom and Jerry. There's none of that dynamics happening. And here's the surprising part. Reciprocity feels calm. It doesn't feel dramatic. If chaos has been your baseline, calm can feel really foreign, even uncomfortable at times, because sometimes in the calmness, that's actually where the intimacy, the real like romantic moments, that's when they can actually happen. And sometimes when we're not filling the space with noise and action, and you really realize that this connection now becomes something super authentic, that can actually feel super uncomfortable, especially if intimacy is something that you're not fully comfortable with. Calm is actually where compatibility can grow. And that actually brings us on nicely to the next green flag number 2. The pace feels even. It doesn't feel rushed or intense, right? How good is that gonna feel? A healthy connection gives you room to breathe. After the first date, there is space and there is time for you to integrate on how you feel. That confusion that you feel after the first date, you should be having time to actually process that so that you're not rushing back into your old patterns again and you're actually doing something new, because creating different outcomes in your dating journey to long-term relationship requires doing different things to get different outcomes. It sounds super simple, but in practice it can be strangely an uncomfortable feeling, and it can sometimes be difficult to do for many different reasons, right? If a man is almost like, let's use the term love bombing for a second, if he is almost chasing the connection with a lot of messages, a lot of attention, he's trying to lock your time in, and it's not really paced evenly, it feels very fast. He's saying the things he knows you want to hear because he's been picking up on your cues on that first date. That almost takes away your space to figure it out for yourself. And that's how sometimes you can get caught up in this stuff, right? Massive green flag. If you're finding it goes a little bit slower than you're liking, especially if you're anxiously attached, or if you're finding that you would like some more time from him, but it's not quite happening, at first, if you've done a lot of attachment theory work, it can feel like you're in an anxious avoidant trap, right? But actually take advantage of that time and use it to actually integrate and process how you feel. And this is the number one way where you can actually break your patterns, because you have time to objectively look at them. He's pacing himself too. Everything that you're doing, if he's genuinely looking for a long-term partnership, he will also be evaluating you. And I know that can sound a bit scary at first, but it's not in a judgmental or like throwaway disposable culture way. He's kind of trying to figure out, how do you guys match? How are you guys integrating? And you should be doing this too. You're both pacing yourself so you actually have time to think and process between the connection. He's not pulling you into a whirlwind romance. I feel like whirlwind romances are for when we're in our 20s, and I'll let you get away with it in your early 30s, but if it's happening after that, you are just repeating bad patterns, especially if ghosting or just a complete quick loss of connection is happening after a week or two, or even at the 3-month mark. There's something happening in the dynamic quite early on that's showing you how this is going to roll out, right? He's not disappearing. He's just steady. He's like, hey, I'd love to see you again. Let's make plans. And that steadiness is emotional availability, right? If you're used to roller coasters, this might feel super boring at first. But I promise you, it's not boring, it's safe. And emotional safety is exactly what allows real chemistry to grow slowly and deeply. Which leads us to another powerful sign, green flag number 3. He does not push physical intimacy early, and I cannot stress this one enough. If you are actually dating for long-term partnership, and if he is too, why is he in such a rush, right? Let's get really analytical about this, right? Listen, babe, he is attracted to you. Of course he is. But he's not trying to use physical intimacy to glue the connection together before emotional intimacy forms. That's not the right way round. He's actually comfortable with the pacing, as we discussed in green flag number 2. He really enjoys the desire and he lets it build naturally, right? He's not rushing to collapse the emotional space between you. Men who see you as a long-term possibility think in years, not nights. And when physical intimacy isn't rushed, you get to observe his character without all of the noise. Which brings us to something emotionally mature men consistently do, green flag number 4. He's genuinely curious about you. How many of you have been on a date, because I know this has happened to me, where you almost just feel like you're interrogating him and you're not quite sure what it's about? It either feels like it's an interview setup, or it kind of feels like you're just asking him a lot of questions and he's just responding. And then it's like the silence just hangs there. You're like, okay. And there's a part of you inside that's potentially quite uncomfortable with this. I know that this used to be me for sure. I would be just using my charisma and my natural personality and jokes and inquisitiveness and all of these beautiful qualities that I had, as I'm sure that you're doing, to fill the space and to fill the silence, instead of actually letting him take up the space. And actually, maybe he's not good at it, so let it hang and let it be a little bit awkward, right? Because when a man is genuinely into you, he's curious about you. It's not a one-sided interaction. It's an energetic transaction. Healthy men ask real questions about you. And he doesn't ask them in an interviewing way, right? He wants to know you. He doesn't want to just know your IG highlight reel. But that's a whole other topic about Instagram that we should get into in the future, right? But here's an important distinction I want you to pay close attention to. You do not feel, when he's asking you questions, like you're auditioning or trying to impress him. And I want you to pay close attention to this. If you've seen my training, Value versus Validation, you will already know that you are not seeking his validation. You don't really, you're happy with yourself. You don't care about what he thinks to the level of, am I an acceptable person? You already know that you are. You're fabulous and you know it. You're just answering his questions and you're making sure you're not trying to impress him. You're just being very authentic. You're just being you. This is who I am and this is what I love and I love doing this and my interests are this and these are my dreams, and you're just being you. You're not impressing him. You're not trying to seek validation from him. And it's really important to pay attention to that. You feel seen. That is such a green flag. You feel so seen, right? Curiosity is actually emotional presence. It shows capacity. It shows relational awareness. And men who are genuinely curious tend to do something else that's incredibly grounding. They remember you. They remember your preferences, your likes and your dislikes. They remember the things that you said on date 1 and date 2. And you know what it is? It can sometimes feel a bit creepy at first, but because they are just so into you, they are just naturally remembering everything that you're saying, so they can keep creating these beautiful date experiences where you get to connect. And it is super cute. And I remember the first time I experienced this with a man I dated, and he remembered everything and it was freaking me out. How do you know me better than I know me? And you know what I realized? It was a skill that I wasn't very good at giving back. And that was such a beautiful experience. The question you can ask yourself is, how much about him do I remember, right? And how much do I actually take on his likes and dislikes and his preferences? This leads us on nicely to your next green flag, because this is your new way of dating. Green flag number 5. He remembers all of your preferences, your stories, the small things you mentioned casually. Attention is an early form of consistency. It shows presence, not performance. This kind of micro presence creates clarity, which is why the next green flag is super, super important. Green flag number 6. If he likes, right, you are not sending your friends messages to deconstruct at 2 a.m. You're not having a coaching session with ChatGPT. I know you do that. You're not going onto YouTube and figuring out, how do I know if he really likes? You just know. You just know. It's very clear. You are two mature people who are 30s plus, who are dating for a long-term, if not lifetime partnership. You're not really playing games. He likes you. And even if you're not clear on whether you like him, we talked about that earlier on, you have the space to actually feel into it, right? Because sis, there is no second guessing. He says what he wants. He says he wants to see you again. He follows through. He's transparent. You don't go home thinking, what just happened? And it doesn't have this really weird, icky, mixed feeling where I think it was good, but then why do I feel so weird on the inside, right? Clarity is your biggest new green flag. Confusion is not. And men who bring clarity early on usually have one more trait that truly predicts long-term compatibility. Green flag number 7, he can listen to you without fixing or deflecting. Now, this one is huge. A little bit about what I talked about earlier around he pays attention to you and he's curious, but you are not validating yourself with him and you are not showing your value to him. Now, what I'm about to say next is super important, and I want you to pay close attention to this because this is one of the key things I help women with. And it was also a massive thing in my personal dating journey that I was doing. And it was my biggest red flag, right? If you have dated emotionally unavailable or narcissistic men, and if that label doesn't feel fully right, men with narcissistic traits, we all have narcissistic traits, but maybe they were a little bit more on the narcissism side. Maybe they showed signs of low empathy. Maybe you just never really knew if they cared or not, right? This is really important for you to pay attention to if you have had those experiences. In particular, if you've had NPD influences in your family, when you share something real, like something about your childhood, something a little bit deep, something that upset you in your past relationship, because let's face it, these conversations come up in early dating, he doesn't minimize what you're saying. He doesn't interrupt you. He doesn't make a joke about it. He doesn't joke it away. He doesn't deflect. What does deflection look like? It looks like maybe you're at a bar and you've just started talking about something important and he's like, oh, by the way, I'm just going to go to the toilet and then let's resume. And then when he comes back, he never really initiates to pick it up. And there's nothing wrong with him needing to go to the bathroom, but if you interrupt someone, then it's only manners for you to pick it up and be like, I'm so sorry, what were you saying? You were saying ABC, right? If he doesn't do that, if he actually uses environmental cues, like the waitress or the waiter comes up like, oh, hey, do you guys need anything else? He doesn't then bring it back to what you're talking about, right? He just doesn't care. He's deflecting. He's uncomfortable with all of that, right? He doesn't want to have those deep conversations, right? That is a massive red flag. It shows a lack of emotional availability at the best, and at the worst, it shows that he's a little bit lower on the empathy scale, and we don't, empath queen, want to get involved with that ever again. I know you know that. You don't need me to tell you that, but that is something to look out for, and that was a huge one for me, right? He doesn't make it about him. He doesn't switch the conversation and make it about him, and basically, he's able to hold the space for these deeper conversations. He has the emotional maturity and he doesn't try and make things lighthearted or laugh things off. I think if the date has come to the point where you've shared something deep and you feel it's appropriate according to what you feel is depth of intimacy. So if you're a deep person, you probably get deep pretty quick, right? I've had a lot of therapists who do this as clients, and they tend to share things about themselves a little bit early on. I don't think that's actually a wrong thing. I know a lot of coaches say that that's not the right thing to do. That in itself isn't wrong if you feel it's appropriate by your standards. And if he is not able to match that or create space or depth, or he doesn't have the availability for that conversation, or he deflects the conversation because it's just not convenient because he wants to have a good time, that's not a match, right? He sits with you. He listens to what you're saying. And biggest bonus green flag, he's able to reciprocate in conversation with what you're saying, even if all he's saying is, I'm so sorry you had that experience. I've never had that experience, but I can imagine A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? So he receives you. That is emotional maturity in action. And emotional maturity is what sustains love, not intensity or the spark. And you might be surprised when you start building intimacy this way, how the spark actually builds and feels different, but it's a spark nonetheless, right? Let's tie some of these green flags together. What do all of these green flags have in common? This is going to feel so good to you when you hear it. They create clarity, consistency, and your personal new favorite, nervous system safety, right? Not confusion, not intensity, not emotional chaos. If you're used to chaos, healthy men might feel quiet and a bit vanilla, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good at first, right? But quiet doesn't mean no attraction. It means it was a first date and you're two creatures who have never met before, and it just takes time sometimes to feel comfortable in front of someone, right? It can mean so many other things, but it doesn't have to mean zero attraction. And this is one of the hardest hurdles, right? But it doesn't have to be this crazy, insane attraction. There are other forms of attraction that is not completely the other side of the spectrum, because I know you're terrified of dating a man who treats you kindly and has all of these green flags, but you feel zero physical attraction for him. There's a whole spectrum in between those two, right? And one of the rookie mistakes that women do when they first get into developing their dating skills is they swing from polarities. Instead of choosing the, oh my God, I can't believe he noticed me and he's asked me out and I can't believe I can't ruin this, like this is an amazing opportunity, they then swing to the nice guy who they feel nothing for. And I promise you, there's a whole spectrum of stuff happening in between there, and you will hit the sweet spot with that when you find the right guy for you, right? Because quiet means your body finally has space to recognize real compatibility. If healthy connection feels different from what you're used to, the next question that's probably on your mind is, well, how do women who actually break their old dating patterns choose differently in the moment, right? And override their old patterns so that they can create new outcomes? If you're curious in that, then please watch the next video that is linked here. Take care, lovelies.